So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell if it's a representative? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you very much for the applause. Welcome to the Gish with Vish. This is our first episode. We're planning to do more than one, in case that wasn't obvious, where we are going to take a look at Dwayne Gish, Blast from the Past. And
Finally.
I know. Now, here's one of the things about Dwayne Gish, right? You might say, well, this is really old stuff, Dapper. What does it matter? There's a couple things. One is, most of those arguments he uses are just exactly the same as the arguments that young Earth creationists are still using decades later, right? They don't update. They don't look at new data and be like, oh, I guess we were wrong. Better update our argument. No, generally they don't. Occasionally they do. You know, there's a few things where they're like, oh, that's a really bad argument. Maybe we should drop that one. But for the most part, nope, just the same stuff as Dwayne Gish. But there is one difference that I do want to highlight while we go through this.
Dibs on reading the Swahili super chat.
That works for me.
Okay.
Okay, but let me just get through the quick little thing, and then we'll go to the super chat and the membership milestone chat. Okay, one of the things I want to notice is that there's a whole lot more gaps that he likes to put God into, and one of the things I want you to notice is how many of those have been closed. Like, oh, well, the scientists haven't figured that out. Well, yeah, maybe in the 70s they hadn't, but here in the 2020s, not so much. Yeah, it turns out that scientists have figured that out. So those are the two things I want to highlight, is just how similar his arguments are to those of every creationist that you're going to hear today, despite the decades of difference, and the degree to which he relies on God of the Gaps arguments, where the gaps have been filled since then. So, first of all, we got a membership milestone chat from Fear the Big Bang was caused by cells monger, which is one of those Elmondo Calvoisms, which is wow.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna read this because it's in Swahili, and I did a whole 3 weeks of Swahili in college. So, majibu mwanzoni ni mfuko wa uume.
All right.
Don't ask me to translate it. I can read it, but I don't know what it means. Unless you use one of the 6 to 10 vocabulary words.
I'm assuming it's probably some kind of a variation on Answers in Genesis is a bag of dicks.
Possibly.
Because if someone super chats in something other than English, unless it's Klingon, that's usually almost always what it is. So we are not currently using the drinking rules on this one. I know sometimes on Saturdays I do institute the drinking rules and we go for it, but this time I don't really want to get drunk in the middle of the day today. So
especially when it's going to be just turbo hot.
Yeah, I think we're supposed to get up into 37 or 38 degrees today. I mean, it's not 40, which does happen here.
True.
I mean, it gets to 42 sometimes.
Gross.
Yeah. All right. The South Geek unofficial for €5 says, "Hey everybody, I'm on an unplanned vacation in Croatia right now. Just gonna leave this here and remind you to hit like and avoid the Bilbo. See you later." Yes, always avoid the Bilbo. I hope you enjoy your unplanned vacation. I hope that's not a problem and that that's an okay thing. Good luck out there. Christine V, who's been a member for 1 month, is at the tetrapod level, says, first a trans flag, feeders, happy game Wrath month.
Yeah, it is.
All right.
July is also Disability Awareness Month.
There you go.
Disability
with
Pride.
A Pride and a Godzilla. Nice. And Jake Nelson, who's been a member for 6 months and is at the tetrapod level, says, getting paid to watch Dapper and Vishanti. Ooh, nice. That's the key right there. That's a cushy job. Well done. Oh, okay. Google Translate for the Swahili apparently says answers
That's
first is the scrotum. So, okay.
Answers beginning in is a bag of. Okay, that yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So this.
What is that temp and freedom units? Too young to fill this all. That's about 99.
I mean,
to 100.
Let me double check exactly what.
I don't know how to convert as easily anymore because David Lynch stopped doing his daily weather reports.
Yes, which is sad.
I know.
Yeah, so I guess right now it's probably about 32-ish degrees, because I don't currently have the temperature up, so. But it's around 100 degrees or so. In freedom units, if those are the units that you prefer for some reason. Which I don't know why you would.
Oh, hey, Dapper, guess what?
No, I guess it's higher than that. Goodness. Yeah, what?
Guess what, Dapper?
I can't
Sal's
guess.
been busy for 82 days.
It's true. 82 days, 5 minutes, and 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, so since apparently it has come up, I will check the actual temperature here, which is to say that it is about 38 degrees, apparently. And I guess it's already 100 degrees or so. So there you go. So, yeah, it's hot. Anyway,
I don't like that.
Astronaut Community for $5 says, I'm making a comment and considering calling a bag of noodles Ansa and Genesis. Joking. No, don't make that a joke. Make that a real thing. Do it.
Oh my god, that's incredible. If somebody discovers like a new type of like tunicate or worm or some other phallic shaped animal, that they need to answer in Genesis.
Nice. Alright, so this video is called Evolution Challenge of the Fossil Record with Dwayne
Oh my god.
Gish. Yeah.
Mr. Willis said that my favorite porn star is neologism.
Goodness. I'm gonna get demonetized.
Actually, I know.
Our last stream you would be got demonetized, and I requested a review and they were like, nope, it's still demonetized.
What?
Yep.
Why?
I don't. Here's the thing. They don't tell you. They're just like, it's just not suitable for advertisers for some reason. And then you just have to guess. And I'm like, here's all of our guidelines about advertiser-friendly content. And I'm like, I don't think this violates any of them. But they seem to. They just won't tell me which one. So that's the fun kind of
Do I need
game.
to, like, go into a cave and try to divine the mind of the algorithm for this?
Yes, the algorithm is casting shadows on the wall of that cave, and you are not allowed to look behind you to see what is casting the shadows. All you see is occasionally a shadow that just comes by and says, demonetized.
I was mostly thinking, like, Oracle of Delphi style.
Well, yeah, we could do that too. Yeah. Just huff some cave juice. Alright, for $5, Philipunk says, let's hear it for the good god of drywall filler. He only lives in the cracks.
Yep.
Alright, so we're going to start off with Dwayne Gish. We have cut out the intro because it had a lot of music and just a bunch of, like, someone in a deep booming voice reading some Hebrew passively. And, like, that doesn't add anything, so we're just not doing it.
Okay. 50-year-old creationists.
From the San Diego, California headquarters of the Institute for Creation Research,
which has moved to Texas, by the way.
Here are ICR scientists and Back to Genesis lecturers, Dr. John D. Morris and Ken Ham.
Yes, back when Ken Ham was
great.
working for ICR. We're going to see him at his most werewolfy, I think.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Nathaniel Gray for $2 says, the algorithm moves with praying hands. Yeah, goodness, the algorithm.
You know, for many years it's been said that the fossil record is where you go to find
literally
proof that evolution has
cosplaying
happened.
Wolverine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now I'm going to say, I've said it before, but I want to reiterate. I am very confident that Ken Ham is not an actual werewolf. Just put.
But you're not 100% sure.
Well, I'm not 100% sure for anyone, but yeah.
Mostly confident.
Very confident. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not a werewolf.
Too Young to Feel This Old is asking, is it Delphi or Delphi? I know a lot of people say it Delphi, but I tend to use consistently, like, long vowels when I'm pronouncing foreign languages. A, E, O, U. So.
Yeah, the original pronunciation would have used a E sound, but English is English, so it's one of those, like, whatever you want. But also, I do like that we have what looks like a lion or a tiger skull. A big old, I guess, dinosaur tooth, maybe? A human skull, what looks like a gorilla skull, just randomly, haphazardly placed here. Yeah, that's definitely got to be a gorilla. I mean, look how big it is. There aren't too many apes that are that big that aren't just big old gorillas. So
yeah, and it's not, like, round enough to be an orangutan.
Yeah, and plus it's got that really prominent sagittal crest, which means this is probably the skull of a male gorilla.
Yeah.
So,
And most people think that the fossils require and represent millions of years to be produced, but Dr. Gish thinks otherwise.
Well, good for Dr. Gish. There is one thing. It is true that it doesn't take millions of years to make a fossil. But the thing is, it's a weird thing that creationists have, where it's like, well, you can make a fossil quickly. It's like, okay, but then that once it's made, that doesn't mean that that's exactly when it's found. You don't just dig up fossils the minute that they fossilize every time. If a fossil is made, or something's permineralized, which is what usually we mean by fossilization when we're speaking colloquially. Sorry, there's a big old truck or something. Anyway, it can then just stay preserved, for millions and millions of years. I don't know where this comes from, this idea that the reason people think fossils are old is because fossilization always takes a long time. First, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Second, no, that's not why anyone thinks they're old. I just don't get why this is a trope.
Ugly German Truth is asking if Dwayne Gish was the one coming from civil engineering, waterworks, or sewage reclamation as a specialty, or is he confusing that with Henry Morris?
Ooh. I think it's Morris, because I'm pretty sure Morris is the one who wrote the Genesis Flood, and I think that that's the connection, the hydrology there, but I'm honestly not positive, and so you should not take my word for it. That's what I'll say there. I think it's Henry Morris, but yeah, I'm not confident about that. So,
but you don't have to take my word for it. Ta-da!
Yeah, we'll go Reading Rainbow style. By the way, the time that they did the tour of the Star Trek: The Next Generation set, I watched that live when I was a kid, and I was like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen on TV."
One of the most gratifying moments in my life was when the Hilton in Las Vegas still had the Star Trek experience and the Quarks bar and all that, and they had a replica of the TNG bridge.
Yeah.
And they had a whole array of tunics that you could put on and get your photo taken, and people had weddings there all the time, and getting a picture of myself in the captain's chair at the bridge.
Yeah,
the tunic on, cool. It was like, yes.
Apparently the recreation of the TNG bridge that they made for Star Trek Picard is still in existence, and there's no current plans to just tear that set down.
Hey, so, cool.
Apparently, currently, there is once again a full-scale replica of the TNG bridge. It's almost exactly the same as the original TNG bridge. The only thing I think that they've changed that I'm aware of is that they added little cup holder shapes to the armrest on the captain's chair.
Gotta have your cup holder.
Yeah, it's very important. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Nearly 20 years ago, he wrote what may be the biggest selling creationist book of all, Evolution, the Fossils Say No.
I have the second edition of that book. It is hilariously bad. Now, I say I have, but I'm pretty sure I've lost it in a move at some point. But I definitely purchased it. I definitely read it, and it is hilariously bad. Carrie Bronson, who's been a member for 26 months, my goodness, is at the amniote level, says, speaking of ham, I would pay so much to watch you and Erica dissect Werewolf the Apocalypse. Your history and her primatology would intersect nicely. That might be fun, yeah.
Please, if you guys start doing World of Darkness stuff, I have to be there.
Well, yeah, I think you're the person I know with the most World of Darkness lore, in their head.
I mean, especially since they just, released all the new, werewolf stuff, and now there's Hunter the Reckoning again. I mean, V5 is good.
When are we getting a new edition of Wraith? Never. It's never.
Well, probably sooner than you get Mummy.
Well, okay, yeah, those are two games that no one played.
But yeah, Wraith, you get it here and there. It's just, I don't know if they're going to completely, redo it for the...
Yeah, the lore is still in the background for Wraith, but, no one played that game when it first came out. I don't think we're getting a new edition of Wraith. Anyway.
Yeah.
And in that book, he pointed out that the fossil record is really an embarrassment to evolution. There's no clue in the fossil record that any basic category of animal ever changed into another basic category of animal. And
the faint sound of yodeling in the distance can be heard.
Yes!
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just it's almost embarrassing how many transitional fossils there are that between well-established groups of animals, or plants for that matter. It's just this is just a lie. It was less of a lie when this was recorded in I don't know, the 80s or something, but it's just absurdly false now.
Yet the fossil record is exactly what it should be, if creation is true. Fascinating material in that book and in this program. Let's watch.
Oh, good. That's the last we're going to see, by the way, of those two, as far as I know. Because I watched most of this on, like, ×2 or something, just to see, like, is this even worth it? Because a lot of the Dwayne Gish stuff is, like, 10 minutes of just rambling. So I did vet this one a little bit. I don't remember all the exact points, but, like, yeah, from what I remember, Ham and that other guy who I don't know don't come back. Although it is really interesting to see Ken Ham as just a lowly underling in someone else's organization.
Yes, I quite enjoy that.
Strawberry Vein for $20. Thank you very much for the generosity. Says, working right now, but it's website work, so I can goof off inside chat today. I'm redoing my whole brand, and since you guys are special, you get to know first. The Velvet Hexagon is now Abomination Cosmetics.
Ooh.
All right.
I
Branding
happen to
change,
be
very nice.
wearing Strawberry Veins tinted lip balm right now, actually.
There you go.
In shade El Chupacabra.
Ah. And also,
I'm always on the hunt for lip balm, because that's one of the few things that I picked up from my late father, is always carrying a tube of, like, chapstick with you. Never know when your lips are going to get chapped, so.
It's true. It can just happen. Also, there was a pelagic tunicate and a heart on fire emoji sent with that. So thank you very much.
Woohoo!
Also, guys, let me know how you like this set, because, I mean, I'm enjoying it, but if you guys are like, oh, this is a terrible, terrible set, we can come up with a new one.
It is commonly assumed by most people that the fossil record provides...
be any thicker.
Look, I'm not going to make fun of him for his poor eyesight. He's not in control of that.
But no, I thought our bodies were, like, perfectly designed and fine-tuned. Isn't the eye supposed to be like a miracle of design or something that proves God?
No. See, the pre-fall eye, which we don't have access to.
Okay, because we definitely have access to those.
Right, yes.
Good times.
The perfect version of the eye was before the fall. We conveniently don't have access to that, so it's a bit unfalsifiable, but, you know. Yeah. Now that there's been a fall, yeah, the eye is no longer perfect. Although, actually, it reminds me, I've been scripting a new series, and, like, this creationist is taking, like, weird opposite stances to what most creationists take in a few places. And it's just, like, bizarre. Like, he's talking about, like, I think that there's planets with alien life out in the rest of the unfallen universe. And I'm like, the rest of the unfallen
universe? Like, did somebody not read, like, Romans?
Well, I literally put Romans 8:22 right in there in the script.
Good. Because I was like, all creation means, like, all of it, right?
Right. I also put in examples from both Western and Eastern Christianity of, like, the theology behind, like, the fall and how it affects the cosmos. And, like, is this supposed to be a universal thing, buddy? But anyway, that's irrelevant.
The unfallen universe. Okay. Okay. Oh, I think I can explain the distant starlight problem. You see, the stars used to be a lot closer to the Earth, but after the fall, they just had to run away so quickly to get away from all that disgusting sin.
Yeah, the stars don't like the sin. Which I guess means maybe the Klingons are out there, and they're just free of sin.
Yeah, who knows?
Olivia Williams for $2.79 Beaver Bucks says, Did the fall change where our optic nerve is? Yes. I'm gonna go with yes. Sure.
Why not?
Yeah.
The support for evolution. And of course, that should be the case. That really should be the case if evolution is true.
I agree. If evolution is true, and we have a reasonably complete fossil record, by which I don't mean even close to completely complete, I just mean complete enough that it gives us a good snapshot of what life was like in the ancient past, which I think we do, then yeah, it should correspond to the predictions of evolution that you would make without the fossil record. Fortunately, it does. In fact, that's how people find new fossils now. At one point, early on in paleontology, right, it was basically just, hey, just dig around and see what you get. But now, funding for new paleontology digs are based on grant proposals that are themselves based on evolutionary biology, saying, like, hey, we want to investigate this period of Earth's past where this transition was taking place, or we're expecting to see, interesting information about the development of this environment through evolutionary time. And then they're granted on that basis. And then they frequently turn up the very thing evolution predicted they would turn up. One of the most famous examples being Tiktaalik. Now, Diem, what is half a wing, aka Diem Fwing? That is excellent.
I can't. You guys are killing me with these these names.
I know. I love it. It started with the humble beginnings of just mocking the creationist use of official at the end of names,
know.
and it's just become
I
so
know.
much more elaborate now. For $5, DM Fwing is what we're going to say for now. Says the rest of the Unfallen universe does explain Romulans and Vulcans. Okay.
Indeed, it does.
Yeah.
Jalon True.
By the way, hey guys, you made a Romulan conlang for Star Trek Picard Season 1. Put it in a reference book.
Yeah!
The Klingon
Some
dictionary
people out there
sells
might
well.
want to learn it.
Yeah, you're not happy enough with just having Klingon that you can learn.
Or Vulcan to some degree. No, I've always liked the sound of Romulan better. It's the phonetics are just really soothing. And like what little bits I would get in the like extra canon books. I'm like, I really want to learn this.
Strawberry Vein says, if the stars used to be closer and moved away from us in 6,000 years, wouldn't there be an enormous amount of redshift? Yes, so much so that most of the stars would end up being invisible.
Well, you see, the fallen stars came towards the Earth because, fallen stars are like, evil spirits and stuff, because that's the way that they view the heavens. So
then they'd be blue
like,
shifted.
at least a third of those are blue shifting towards us, right? Yeah, it's totally about a third. Trust me, bro.
What greater evidence for evolution could we have?
Genetics.
Genetics, yeah.
That remains the best evidence for evolution, according to basically everybody.
Than the fossil record. After all, the fossil record is the record of life that we...
It's a record of life.
It's your genes.
Yeah, the genes are also a record. That's why we can do things like study the effects of past bottlenecks in the history of the human lineage, which says that at one point, the lineage leading up to modern humanity was possibly as small as 10,000 individuals. No, probably not quite that small. There's probably more than that, but yeah.
Okay, JS is throwing shade at me. I will address this. Okay. JS is asking, will Vishanti release stuff on her channel? Yes, I will. I know it's taking me like an embarrassingly long time. Part of that was me getting promoted at work. Part of that is me just being ADHD and like procrastinating. Part of it is I had to kind of rearrange my bedroom and set up a streaming bot. So the plan is, yes, I actually do have some scripts in progress. I have some like I'm kind of going like the cheapo use PowerPoint slides for now route because I don't animate. So yeah, it's coming. It's just taking me a lot longer than I thought.
Yeah. All right, now we got a couple things. One is Vandali 1998, who's been a member for 33 months and is at the Amnio level. Thank you very much for your very generous support. Says, so this is the original Young Earth creationist that all modern ones use as a template. Basically, yeah. I would argue that the original one is Ellen G. White, the prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventists. But she's really not the template that the modern ones use. They basically mostly base themselves off this guy, Dwayne Gish, and to a lesser extent, Henry Morris. Also, Bree from Hiveside and I will be talking about bees in 3 hours if anyone is interested. Well, there you go. If you want to hear about bees, I hope you talk about some native bees and not just, European honeybees that have become, established all over the world. Because also native bees
Save the bees!
Now, Benthic, structuring isn't fraud. Tunicate B2022. Which, in case you guys don't know what that's a reference to, Kent Hovind was convicted of structuring, which is an attempt to hide cash transactions from the government in an effort to avoid paying taxes, which is in fact a kind of tax fraud. But he's like, that's not fraud, it's structuring. And he also, to this day, cannot explain to you what structuring is, despite it being explained to him carefully multiple times before, during, and after the trial. And
he's not smart enough.
To the point where, at one point, after explaining it over and over, the judge said to Kent Hovind, Mr. Hovind, do you speak English?
God, if I was a judge and it wouldn't violate, like, ethics rules, I literally would have asked him, English, do you speak it?
Now, also, the reason we're mentioning this is because, of course, Benthic Structuring Isn't Fraud Tunicate, B2022, has gifted 5 Dapper Diamonds for memberships, and they went to Porter Barbecue, Luigi Potter, Colin Dietrich, Rodent No Last Name, and Supercritical Snake. There we go. That means by the way, that supercritical snake is giving off more neutrons than, or sorry, he's absorbing more neutron, or wait, let me get this right. The number of neutrons being given off by each fission event in supercritical snake is more than enough to recreate that amount of power in new fissions from the capture of those neutrons, meaning that currently his power output is increasing.
I only followed half of that.
It's nuclear power stuff. It was also, I had to rearrange my brain back into that mode in order to explain it in a way that wasn't wrong.
Tesla Ranger is quoting from the McKinnon-Mitchell documentary, The Weakness of Kennewick, which is super good. Should watch it. When the preceding magistrate judge asked Hovind if he wrote and spoke English, Kent responded, quote, to some degree.
Yes. Oh, man. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Kent.
Have inscribed in the rocks. And if evolution is true, then of course that fossil record should provide the very best evidence for evolution.
Now, I will say, at the time that he was saying this, genetic sequencing was largely a dream. So I'm not going to say that he was wrong to say it at this point, that this would have been a really good piece of evidence for evolution and that genetics wouldn't have been, because again, this is a time when genetics barely existed, basically.
I was going to say, this video is at least from the 90s, right?
I think it's more like the 80s, but yeah, it could be the 90s.
I was going to say, because if it's early 90s, that was when the idea of using RNA to deliver, packages of information, changing your viral programming and stuff like that. I'm explaining it badly, but people were like, haha, that's impossible! And now, 30 years later, we're using messenger RNA to do vaccines, so...
No, see, those are actually gene therapy shots that are going to change your genes and mutate you into a non-human.
Okay.
Because some people don't understand how RNA works.
Yeah.
All right, Pibblepunk for $5 says, I have the same question for Jeffrey Tompkins. Do you understand English, that is? For the same reason. Yeah. Creationists seem to have a habit of pretending to not understand basic concepts. And in case you guys were wondering about the context there, yeah, he was asked some very basic questions about his analysis of the human and chimp genomes, where he famously comes up with ludicrously low numbers that everyone knows are BS. And his response to this was basically to just obstinately refuse to understand very basic concepts in genetics. The thing his degree is in. Right? This is you know that bit in The Simpsons where Ralph says, "What's a battle?" And Principal Chalmers says, "Did that child just ask what a battle is?" And, Principal Skinner's like, no, he said, "What's that rattle?" And Chalmers is like, "Oh, okay." It's like this, except instead of Ralph Wiggum, it's a PhD in history.
Yeah.
It's like, no, dude, you do not know. There's no way you don't understand this. Yeah. That's the kind of energy Jeffrey Tompkins is giving off. He's acting like Ralph Wiggum's while having a degree in genetics. A PhD in genetics. It's like, dude, I have trouble believing you're that stupid.
Sandbox, though. My parents said I'm not allowed to play in the deep end.
Ralph Wiggum is a treasure. Gary Bronson for $5 says, as terrible jokes go, if the reactor flashes pink, it's a girl.
Yes, good.
All right, here we go.
If the reactor flashes pink, it's just advertising for Oppenheimer.
Oh. Actually, reactors often glow blue as a result of Cherenkov radiation, which is cool.
That means they're not advertising for Barbie.
Mm-mm. Maybe they're advertising for Ken, because it's blue?
Yeah, maybe they're advertising for Ken.
David B22585, who's been a member for 11 months since at the annual level, says, hey, don't compare these people to Ralph Wiggum. Ralph is sincere. Fair.
That's fair.
That's fair, yeah.
Ralph is a just sweet, precious little boy.
Yes, he is. I don't think there's a deceptive bone in Ralph's body.
Sweet, sweet Ralph Wiggum.
Go banana!
My cat
should we
smells like cat food.
Expect from the fossil record if evolution is true? Well, evolutionists believe that life began about 3 billion years ago.
Sure.
Plus or
put in
minus
an order of magnitude.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah. And here's the thing, right? Again, we got to remember this was in the 80s or 90s, so, But also for $2.79 Beaver Bucks, Olivia Williams says, too much pink energy is dangerous. which is something that Zordon informed us of, and it's very true. Yeah, it is definitely true. Actually, weirdly enough, like that one line has gotten spun off into like some deep lore over in the comic books about like instability in the Morphin Grid when more than one person uses the same powers for Power Rangers and stuff. Like, oh, there's like someone turned this weird meme line into actual lore.
Chris McDaniel says you skipped a membership chat. I'm scrolling up. I don't see it.
Did I?
I don't see it. Let me filter out the stuff. Okay.
I think I did.
I know see.
Yeah,
I do not see it.
If there was one that I missed, it's definitely one that's not in my feed. Which is
I don't see it either.
Probably possible. Strawberry Bane for $20 says, I found a book in my dad's hoard by Henry Morse. It's called That Their Words May Be Used Against Them. Quotes from evolutionists that are useful for creationists, which is the single most young Earth creationist thing I've seen. Yeah, so here's the thing.
Quote mining, the book.
It literally is that. And the thing is, it's not the only one. There's more than one source that creationists have compiled that's just a bunch of quote mines for them to share around. Like vampire bats feeding each other blood that they're regurgitating when they all come back, and some of them didn't quite get to feed enough. That's the image I have. Instead of blood, they're regurgitating ridiculous quote mines into each other's mouths.
Meanwhile.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to put this, right? That is so beyond the realm of acceptable behavior in academia that it's hard to express in words just how inappropriate that behavior is. Now, it's not like inappropriate in a criminal sense, right? There's nothing illegal about publishing a book like that. But the idea that you would publish a collection of quote mines to help people misinform other people about what the people being quoted are saying, I mean, if you were in real academia, that would get you exiled, basically. You would never be taken seriously again. But yeah, Wayne Rossi for $1.99 US says, AIG are a diorama of bent Wookiees. Nice.
Saying that it disappeared, but I can see all of the fan chats that have been sent, and I don't see it in the list, so maybe YouTube ate it. It ate it.
Tab says, thank you for that mental image. What, you don't like the mental image of creationists regurgitating quotes into each other's mouths like vampire bats puking up blood for each other? Thanks for existing, vampire bats, just for giving me a great little metaphor. Poor vampire bat. You know, they're being like locally exterminated in a bunch of places because they're not great for livestock. It's a bad time to be a vampire bat nowadays.
Aww.
Yeah. Which is too bad because do you know they can run on the ground? Make these cute little hops. Where like they push their arms forward and like launch off with them as they pull them back like pole vaulters or something, except on their weirdly long arms. It's very cute. Anyway, here we go.
A few 100 million years, and that life began as some little microscopic organism, maybe something like a bacterium or amoeba or something.
No, very little like a bacterium, even less like an amoeba. Both of which are modern life forms with billions of years of evolutionary history behind them.
Yeah, they have DNA, right? And that, as far as we can tell, DNA was not
probably not the first
there when life kind of began. It was mostly RNA.
The first organism was probably RNA-based. It probably had far fewer genes than even the smallest genome of any bacterium. It definitely wasn't as complex as an amoeba, which has cells that are, if anything, more complex than yours. And certainly far, far more complex than any bacterium. Yeah, it was probably far less efficient than any modern bacteria, which tend to be some of the most biochemically efficient organisms on the planet. Let's see. Mark Smith says, Dynapink is the most dangerous of the Dynamen. So I don't think the idea is that pink energy is on its own just particularly dangerous. It's just that when you have too much of it in one place, it becomes too dangerous. In fact, if we were to dip back into that deep lore that comes in from the Power Rangers thing, it's actually that having more than one person using the same powers at the same time causes instability, which can negatively affect the people using those powers. Which was one of the problems when Lord Draken decided to fracture the power from the power coins he'd stolen to create his sentries with his, mastodon sentries and saber-tooth tiger sentries and whatnot. And Tyrannosaurus sentries. Can't forget about that. But Johnny, don't worry. Well, I'll send you some Power Rangers comic books to get you caught up.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you'll read them avidly.
Yep.
They're actually pretty good, though. Like, I'm not kidding.
I'm not questioning you. I'm just like, this is something that I'm like, nah, all right.
Something like that. And during the vast stretch of time since that time, hundreds of millions of years, this little microscopic organism has diversified and evolved into everything living today and that has ever lived.
Yeah, basically. That part's accurate.
It's kind of how the tree of life works, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's not always been linear. There's been a lot of horizontal gene transfer, especially at the base. But still, overall, it's pretty reasonable.
Now, if that's true, then I think you could see that this process would have produced literally billions times billions times billions.
I think we're going a few too many orders of magnitude.
Big number. Therefore, God.
Of transitional form, or
no.
What does he think the insect kingdom number's at?
Well, yeah,
like,
but he means like in the fossil record that we'll have found. So there's a few problems with this, right?
Every animal that dies leaves a fossil. Gotcha, Dwayne.
Yeah, it requires at the very least that every species to have ever existed have a representative in the fossil record, and also for us to have found every species that exists in the fossil record. Now, we know the second part isn't true because almost daily new fossil taxa are described somewhere in the literature, right? So we know that we're not even close to having found all of the species that have been preserved. And second, we have good reason to think that there are many species that haven't been preserved. So we know one part of this that would be required for this argument to work is definitely false. We know we haven't found all the species that have been preserved in the fossil record. And there's no reason to think the first part is anything but false either. So, yeah, there have been a lot of transitional forms. And there are a lot of transitional fossils. But the idea that we should have found every single transitional form is ludicrous. There is no expectation that that would be the case. If it were the case, it would be one of those, like, that's a little convenient. A little too convenient.
Every living thing is a transitional form.
There is also that. Now, I will say that
literally everything that has ever lived or will live,
yeah,
or is living, is a transitional form.
Now, I will say that I do think there is a sense in which you can use the word transitional form to not necessarily mean every living thing. When you're talking
I know what
about,
he means by it, but like technically,
yes. But when you're using it to refer to transitions between two well-established types of morphology, right? So like between basal apes and modern humans, or between basal theropods and modern birds, or something like that, right? Or basal parasodactyls and modern rhinos or hippos, then you can actually come up with, well, these are transitional for that sequence and these other things are not.
But also, like, you know, if you go maybe a few thousand years in the future, human beings may not have pinky toes anymore.
One less toe to stub.
One less toe to stub, thank goodness, because if there's a champ at stubbing toes, it's me.
Unfortunately, you're stuck with the toes you have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Well, unless there's reincarnation.
I guess. Yeah.
Astro Nakamimi for $5 says, how much do you want to bet that the Sal bitch made time? I like that you had to use the IPA because I guess YouTube does not like.
Yeah, you probably didn't want to like it. Yeah.
Awesome. How much do you want to bet that the Sal bitch made timer will eventually have as much time on it as Dapper had been alive when it started? I don't think that'll happen. I'll probably get tired of it by that time, honestly.
I think, was it Ugly German Truce earlier had asked, like, if the Sal bitch made timer is going to have a date on it that's longer than the war in Ukraine?
That's possible.
Yikes.
I expect the war in Ukraine to end at some point. I don't expect Sal to stop being bitch made ever. I don't think he's ever going to do it. But hey, Sal, if you're watching, I would love to be proved wrong. I would much rather be proved wrong than continue to have the bitch made timer.
The choice is yours.
Yeah. And I mean that sincerely. I would much rather have him stop being bitch made. It's just...
Only you can prevent being bitch made.
It's true. All right, here we go.
Or intermediate types. as that little microscopic organism evolved into a multicellular organism.
Something that, by the way, since this has been done, we've actually managed to have happen in real time in laboratory experiments. You know, the kind of thing that creationists like to say you can't do with evolution.
You didn't do it in a lab.
Yeah. Now, of course, what's happened since then is just that they've said, well, that just proves that it takes intelligence. It's like, oh,
yeah,
I see.
it's literally the animation of the rocket pushing the goalposts into space. That's what they're going to do. If you can't do it in a lab, they're going to say, see, it's impossible. If you do it in a lab, they're going to go, see, humans had to, you know, or an intelligence had to do it. They're never going to accept it.
Bodog has just joined the channel at the tetrapod level. Thank you for joining the memberships, Bodog. Everybody, send your send Cecil tunicates and tetrapods.
Yeah, just a few pelagics.
Pelagic. Nope.
Throw them in there.
Don't listen to this.
Nice little welcome gift.
Don't listen to this.
Nice
heretic.
Soothing shade of teal.
See, Tiri Rana's got it there with the Cecil tunicates.
I mean, halfway.
The
Dutch tunicates. You know.
Well, you know. All right, here we go.
And then this multicellular organism diversified into the vast array of complex invertebrates that now exist and have.
Well, no, at that point it would have been the complex invertebrates that existed back when they were divergent.
At the time.
Right. Yeah. Because the way evolution works is not like, oh, hey, we had a speciation, and now it's modern lobsters and humans way back in the Cambrian. That's not how that works.
That's what makes me laugh so hard about a lot of these really bad arguments, is that they think that life, when it happened, just looks like it does today.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, dude. Like, where are the trilobites? Well, trilobites are back. But you get what I'm saying.
You get that a lot with... You hear people say, like, well, almost all the modern phyla appear in the Cambrian. Even Chordata, our phylum. Like, okay, but Cambrian chordates were basically just worms with a funny back. There were no, like, rabbits or tigers or even you would think of as fish, right? So saying, like,
they have butt antennae?
No, they didn't. But many of the arthropods did. So, yeah, it's just... Here we go.
Existed. And then that invertebrate, whether it be a clam or a...
This is a modern coral reef. I mean, look, that's a teleost fish right there. And modern coral.
Famously not an invertebrate.
I mean, the coral are invertebrates, to be fair.
Well, the coral, but yeah, it's like there's fish.
But those are also types of coral that didn't evolve until, like, the Mesozoic.
Snail or a jellyfish or a worm or something like that.
Here's a fun thing about the word worm. It basically just means tube-shaped organism that isn't a vertebrate. So it's not a taxonomically useful thing, right? In fact, there's a cartoon that I saw that was animal crackers for zoologists, right? And they're all just worms. They're all just worms, but they're specifically very distantly related worms. Like, oh, here's a priapulid worm, and here's like a polychaete worm, and here's an annelid worm.
Oh my god, amazing.
And yeah, it was great because for a zoologist, like, yeah, the difference between a polychaete and like an annelid is a vast gulf. Whereas for most people, they're just like, it's a worm. What are you talking about? It's just a worm. It's like, not really. Also, Inkboy for €2. Say dollars. It's not dollars. Says Cecil Tunicate loves pelagic tunicate equals peace. Yeah, but they don't love each other. There's a deep war, a deep divide between...
Listen, pelagic tunicates love sessile tunicates, and that's not mutual, and it should be.
I don't know that that's true. I've never seen any
pelagic tunicates accept you for who you are. They're not trying to change you.
Except
so yeah,
the
sessile tunicates just need to accept other types of tunicates.
This just sounds like propaganda.
I think you're just being, bigoted against the pelagic types. Just accept them. They're different.
I feel like I'm being told that my chocolate ration has been increased from 15 grams to 10 grams.
Depends on what base counting you're using.
Heather Kuhn, who's been a member for 1 month, is at the tetrapod level, sends tetrapod, Cecil Tunicate, 2 tetrapod, which is in fact the proper way to welcome people to the channel.
Yeah, it's one way.
And Carrie Bronson for $10 says, I'm increasingly convinced that people like this just can't conceptualize any part of the world changing. If it is now, they think it's always... If it is now, they think it always was and always ought to be. Yeah, so there's actually a name for that. It's called... what's it called? I think it's present day bias.
Conservative?
Well, okay, but there's this thing like present day bias, right? Where the way things are now is how they ought to be. Now, some conservatives actually have like a past bias where like, oh, things should be how they were at some time in the past. Now, they very rarely pick a particular date because they also don't want to go live in the bad old days. But, you know,
The past was the worst.
they'll pick aspects of the past that they like. And to be fair, there were some aspects of the past that were nice. For instance, 300 years ago, the air was a lot nicer to breathe.
You could actually drink out of freshwater streams.
Now, does that mean that overall 300 years ago was a better time to be alive than now? No. But there were silver linings to how terrible it was 300 years ago. But yeah, present day bias is actually a thing. And it's a careful thing you have to really worry about, right? Because is right now the best possible way that the world could be? Probably not in most cases. But on the other hand, if on that basis you simply change things, then just for the sake of saying, well, this isn't great, then you might actually then make things worse. So you have this, like, you got to balance the how are things now? Well, not great, so we need to change, versus the is this change going to be worse or better? And it's a careful balance that you have to strike. And yeah, present day bias is a real thing, and a lot of people have it. In fact, sometimes I suspect that in cases where like there's some kind of animal that's going extinct that's really not going extinct because of humans, which is not common, but it does happen. It's like, should we be spending a lot of conservation resources on that, or should we be concentrating on animals that are going extinct because of humans? And I don't have a good answer to that, because I can see great arguments on both sides, but I do worry about present day bias in some cases. So anyway, here we go.
Evolved into a fish, or the vertebrates. And then this fish evolved into amphibians?
Not quite. So, first...
I was gonna say, I don't remember every step, but I'm pretty sure it didn't go in that order.
Yeah, well, first we're being shown a teleost fish, which is a kind of actinopterygian fish, which is not the kind of fish that tetrapods are. Tetrapods are sarcopterygian, and specifically they're in dipnoi, and then within dipnoi they're in rhipidistia, and then within that they're in stegocephalia. There's a bunch of steps, right? You can't go from just generic teleost fish to tetrapod. But further, the lysamphibians, which is what we now commonly call amphibians, are not what directly resulted when fish became tetrapods. They became the basal tetrapods, which were similar to amphibians in terms of lifestyle and reproductive strategies, but modern lysamphibians make up their own lineage of tetrapods that is sister to modern amniotes. And so,
hey, Dapper.
Yeah.
When a frog is colored that brightly, generally, what is that trying to tell the other creatures?
No touch.
No touchy.
Is dangerous.
No eaty.
Yeah, very, very dangerous. I just lost my train. Oh, right. So if you look at like ancient quote-unquote amphibians, meaning non-amniote and also non-lysamphibian tetrapods, like Diplocalus or Estimenosuchus or something. No, not Estimenosuchus. That's a freaking synapse. What am I thinking of? Doesn't matter. The ancient, like Devonian type things. Those aren't either modern amphibians, nor are they modern amniotes. They are basal to both. Now, for $5, Pillowpunk says, we could have a long conversation about how cultural nostalgia for mythologized past and how that's utilized for conservative political ideology. Oh, yeah. We definitely could. Yep. I mean, it's a big part of conservatism is, one, an affinity for the past, and two, a caution about change, lest change make things worse, which then ties back into the nostalgia for the past. So, yeah.
And of course, that would require that the fins would gradually change into feet and legs. And
man, kind of like we get in things like Tiktaalik and Acanthostega and other, various basal tetrapodomorphs and whatnot. It's almost like we actually do have fossils of this entire transition from fin to leg. And also, there are a number of fish today whose fins are in fact working as legs, right? There are frogfish, there are mud skippers. There's even that one weird fish whose name I don't know, but like it's turned the little rays in its pectoral fins into individual little spider leggy things so it can like spider crawl its way across the ocean in the creepiest way imaginable.
horrific.
Yeah, it's fins turn into limbs today. This isn't something that happens
Yeah.
one time off in the past. Hey, you ever hear of the walking catfish?
Yes.
Did you know it didn't get that name because it never goes around on land? In fact, it often goes around on land, hence the name.
Yeah.
Of course, many other changes would have to take place for a fish to change into an amphibian.
Not that many. I mean, loss of scales is basically it. Because remember, lungs are ancestral to fish. Fish that currently don't have lungs lost them.
Then we are told the amphibian evolved into reptiles.
Okay, but not directly into freaking sea turtles, man. But also, not even into reptiles, into basal amniotes, which are a group that exists before the
Tripod
split.
fish.
Tripod fish, yes. That is, I mean, that's a thing.
Thank you, Hortor. BBQ.
But yeah, the basal amniotes arise before the split between sauropsids on one side and synopsids on the other. And then the sauropsids go on to evolve into what we now call reptiles. In fact, you can kind of say sauropsida and reptilia are basically synonymous. It's a little bit tricky because the word reptilia doesn't have much cladistic meaning, so like it's basically at this point kind of a colloquial term instead of a real taxonomic term, but who cares? And then on the other side, the synapsids lead to the mammals. But at no point was the ancestor of any mammal a reptile. And at no point did, say, reptiles stop being reptiles so they could turn into birds. Birds are still reptiles, and mammals have literally 0 reptiles in their ancestry.
And then reptiles evolved into birds.
True, but again, birds are still reptiles. So it's like when you're saying, you know,
mammals evolved into humans.
Right. Humans are still mammals. If you don't believe me,
mammals,
feel free to check how many jawbones you have, or check, I don't know, how many orifices you have inside your pants, or check, let's see, what are some other good ones? Check to see whether you have nipples. If you do, you're a mammal. If you don't, you still might be a mammal because you could be a platypus, but probably not.
Freaking platypus.
What?
I don't know
and
why
echidnas
creationists don't lean into the platypus thing more, because that is just a big bag of WTF.
Ken handles.
When it comes to,
he has a whole weird
biological
sing-songy rhyme about platypuses that he does. Strawberry Vein, who's been a member for 2 months and is at the amniote level, says conservatives think that the whole of history was the height of the Roman Empire, then the 1950s, then present day, and they imagine all of them wrong. I mean,
yeah,
that is certainly describing a certain group of American conservatives, but I don't think that describes all of conservatism in all of its current modern day contexts. But certainly there is that strain within American conservatism. Although, also, there's also strains of American conservatism that's basically just team sports, where there's no real ideology. Because one of the things is, you can find, ideologically consistent conservatives who have principles that they follow, and they do so pretty consistently, right? But then you can also just find people who are
they're increasingly rare.
It does. But then you can also, find people who are just I'm on red team. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as deep as it goes. I'm on red team, and therefore I like the red team things. And it makes just as much sense as the riots in ancient Byzantium over which color flag your chariot racers had. I'm on blue team, I'm on red team, I'm on green team, and now we have a street riot that results in actual deaths on the basis of who should win the next horsey race.
Look, it's no different than sports teams winning and their fans going and starting fires and burning sofas. So.
Yeah. And also, there are people who are just on Team Blue, too. And what I'm telling you is, hey, don't just be on a team. Actually carefully consider what your team is saying about what they want to do in the world and what changes they want to make and what changes they don't want to make. And make a decision based on that. Not just based on, I like that color.
And if they don't match what you think is important, then do a different color, or maybe no color at all. Hey.
Yeah, there are also there's a red team and a blue team and a green team and a yellow team. You can pick lots of teams. Anyway,
lots of different ones.
Astronekamimi for $4.99 says creationist doesn't understand how subsets work. Cliche. Yeah, they're really bad at that.
Yeah.
Except they're really only bad at it in times when being good at it would make their life harder, right? Like, they're actually not bad at it normally. But anyway, here we go.
That means, of course, the scale of the reptile had to gradually change into feathers.
Yes, and in fact, we already know that the basic order of this is going from a scale to a hollow filament, to a filament with branches, to a filament where the branches are coming out of a central location, which that central location is just those filaments but bunched together. And then from there, on to more and more complex shapes. And we also know that all it takes to get alligators to go from scale to the hollow filament is messing with their hormones just a bit in embryo. And then suddenly they get fuzzy proto-feathers. So the step one, how do you get a scale to turn into a feather? I mean, they're extremely different. They're really not, though. They're made of the same chemical. They're governed by the same genes, and they both develop from the same embryonic structure, the placode. In fact, they're so similar that modern bird scales that you see on their feet are actually stunted feathers.
That's super cool. Also, Atomic Squirrel in the chat says creationists don't bring up the platypus because then they have to have the conversation about how they got to Australia. I mean, they could swim, right?
No. We all know that the correct way that the animals got to Australia after the flood is that those are the animals that ended up getting shot there by a post-flood volcano. Which is an actual excuse I've heard used. I believe it was Eric Hovind who proposed that a volcano shot them there. Which is basically the same as saying that they were shot there in a cannon. It's just God's cannon instead of some guy's cannon. Which, that's not how things work. You're not going to survive being shot by a volcano from the Middle East to Australia. You're just going to turn into a splat.
How many thousands of miles is that, by the way?
You would have to go into space. You'd have to go suborbital. So first you're going to be frozen and suffocated in space. Then you're going to turn into a red splat over in Australia. That's all that's going to happen.
I mean, even if you land in the water, it's not a good time.
Yeah, no. At those speeds, water has about the same effect as concrete. It's not going to be any different. But also, is it more ridiculous than when Dan Biddle described animals getting blasted apart like tsunamis, like they're made of Legos?
The forelimbs of the reptile had to change gradually into wings.
Well, first they turn into arms, which are already closer to wings, and then they turn into wings. But yeah, that's true. And also, here's a fun thing. We have transitions throughout basal Archosaurus into Dinosauromorpha, into Dinosauria, of the forelimbs of basal Archosauromorphs, which were primarily used for locomotion, turning into the arms of dinosaurs that were mostly used for things like manipulating food, then turning into climbing limbs in various Maniraptoran forms, which then turn into wings in later, Paravian forms. We have all those fossils. Isn't that nice?
That would have produced an enormous number of intermediate stages.
It did. And we've got them.
And of course, it is suggested the reptile evolved into mammals.
Again, no. There were no mammals in the ancestry of mammals. There were things that were sometimes called mammal-like reptiles, but there's a reason we don't use that term anymore. It's because they were never reptilian. What used to be the case is that reptilia was defined by what's called plesiomorphic traits. That's probably a word that people want defined. So plesiomorphic traits are traits that are common in a group, but they're common because the ancestors of that group and other groups all share them. So for instance, let's see, what's a good one for, say, humans? That's plesiomorphic, right? So let's see. Having differentiated teeth, right? So you have incisors and you have canines and premolars and molars. That's plesiomorphic to, say, apes. Because not only do apes have it, but also that's just generally how mammals work, right? So you can't say, okay, well, apes are the animals that have incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Because at that point, how would you say that that doesn't count for dogs then? They also have all those same kinds of teeth. So having these differentiated teeth, right, heterodont dentition, is plesiomorphic for apes. But having a Y5 molar, the tricuspid molar, that's not plesiomorphic. That's an apomorphy, which means that it's derived in that group. No other animals besides apes have the tricuspid molars. Now, reptilia used to be defined by things like having certain jawbone arrangements, like with the syringular and the angular and the articular and the dentary, and that core, connecting to a certain bone in the jaw, or sorry, in the cranium. Okay, and it used to be defined in things like, having scales and whatnot, being cold-blooded, but those are all plesiomorphic. Now, when we talk about reptilia, we actually have synapomorphies that we apply to them, and they do not apply to the quote-unquote mammal-like reptiles. So because we've moved on in science has advanced, we realize that, hey, defining reptilia via plesiomorphies, bad idea. We now know that calling the early synapsids mammal-like reptiles is misleading, and so we don't do it anymore. Now, I don't know, actually I do know that this was not so much the case at the time that Dr. Gish was giving this. At the time, mammal-like reptile was still how we referred to a lot of synapsids, so I'll give him a little bit of slack there. But the problem is that you still get creationists saying this exact same thing, right? I can give Dwayne Gish a break from 40 years ago or something, but I can't give modern creationists that same break, but they still use the same thing, which is one of the things I wanted to highlight in this whole thing. Now, we've got a few super chats. Astral Nekomimi for $4.99 US says, seriously considering making my name Astral Suborbital Platypus Nekomimi, but I want to make my own YouTube video, so I don't know. You could just do it temporarily until you do start making the videos and switch it back. It would be pretty funny. Heather Kuhn for $5 says, I gotta ask, given the age of this video, why is irreducible complexity on the bingo card? That is a good question. I don't know. As I've said before, I am not the one in charge of the bingo cards. So I cannot answer specific questions about why certain things are on bingo cards. I will say, though, that while Michael Behe came up with the term irreducible complexity, he based it on earlier design arguments. Specifically, he based it on Pele's watch, or Pele's watchmaker, whatever you want to call it, which... I mean, that's an argument that goes back to, what is it, the 1700s or something? Paley's watch and watchmaker? I'm not sure. But it's centuries, so it's definitely not recent. So you could probably fill it in for things that are essentially irreducible complexity, but not by that name. And also, remember, it's your bingo card. It's like if you're a bird watcher, it's your birding checklist. You get to decide whether or not what you saw counts. Diem, what uses half a wing, aka Diem Fwing, just sent 5 fwing emojis for $2 US. Thank you very much. Fwing, 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 fwing. Because of course that is what we're talking about. We're talking about where are the fwings?
Where are the fwings?
And of course the answer is 1, there are a lot of fwings right now in things like flying squirrels, flying frogs, things like that. But also, they're all over the fossil record. There's this whole thing called Maniraptora, and within it, this whole thing called Paravia, which are basically all the dinosaurs that are getting more and more bird-like. And that's where the fwings are.
And mammals evolved into the higher mammals or primates, and
that is terms that we would not use today. Oh, bye, Vishanti.
I have no idea what just happened then. Sorry.
Do you still have the video shared?
Yes.
Okay, welcome back.
Discord just decided.
Nah. You don't need to be in this call anymore, apparently.
Nah.
All right, well, welcome back. All right, actually, we're going to take a quick break now because it has been a bit over an hour. So I wasn't even noticing. I was having a lot of fun. All right, well, first of all, before we go, I want to say we have 99 people that I'm seeing watching, but only 75 people who've hit like. So please do hit like, and we will be back very shortly. right, we are back. Now, before we get into the quick announcements, first, Hads has a question for Vishanti. Do you pronounce it Gish with Vish?
I pronounce it the way that he told me to pronounce it.
Who?
Dwayne Gish. The way that he says to pronounce his name is the way that I pronounce it.
Got it. All right. So, a few things. First of all, we've had a few new members, or perhaps people rejoining. We've had a little bit of both. If you would like access to the Discord server, which isn't required, but it is an option for you, don't email me or DM me or anything to ask, because this is how you do it. Go to your Discord, go to settings, go to connections, add the account that you were gifted a membership with, and then you will automatically be added to the server. And also, as importantly, automatically taken away, because the server is there for people who are paying for it. It is, in fact, essentially a subscription. So, yes, that is the correct way to do that. Also, speaking of which, I want to say thank you very much to all the people who have been very generous today. And I want to say that this channel is almost entirely supported through the direct support of its fans. And so if you are someone who is not currently supporting and you would like to, we have a number of ways to help with that. There is the Patreon and the channel memberships, which are two of the biggest ways, where they are recurring monthly, or in the case of Patreon, you can opt to go annually for a 12% discount. Charges, which of course you can also cancel at any time. And those go very directly towards supporting the channel. In both cases, you get access to the Discord server. You get access to months and months worth of early access videos. There's hours of early access stuff that only people who are channel members and patrons have access to, that you can find either on the Patreon page or in the community tab on my webpage, or sorry, my YouTube site, if you are a member, because there are member-only posts. There are other things, like if you go to the $5 tier or above, I will put your name in the credits. I currently have over 200 names in the credits, which is crazy. And actually, you guys are going to see them all flash by very quickly in today's end credits, because they go by in a flash. Now, if a monthly or annual thing isn't your deal, but you still want to support, there's a merch store listed in the description. There's also a merch store for Vishanti, which I believe is listed in the description. There's also one
wish list.
A wish list. Wish list for Vishanti. Sorry, yeah. There's also wish lists. So myself and Bent and Vishanti all have wish lists listed in the description if you want to just get us a little present. Also, Bent does have a Patreon, which is listed, where you can get early access to, or you can actually just get access to the early drafts of his music and whatnot. So please do check that out if you're interested in Bent Hopen's music. There is also, of course, just if monetary isn't the way that you can or want to support, please just make sure you like these videos, share them with people you think will want to watch them, or just share them generally, and put in comments to help with the algorithm. All of those things are great ways to help the channel gain viewership, and thereby get more people who will subscribe, who will watch regularly, and some fraction of those people will also choose to support. What's up?
Speaking of, when you reminded me of my Vish list, as Icarus put it, Vince O'Connor bought me something off my wish list this week, so thank you, Vince O'Connor.
Very nice.
Very generous.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Pibblepunk for $2 says, can confirm it's a lot of great content. Yeah, it really is. The video that's going to come out this week on Thursday was actually about 5 months ago is when it came out for subscribers and supporters. So you could have been watching this in February or March. So, all right, let's move on. I think we need some more Gish here in this episode of Gish with Vish.
Yeah.
Primates evolved into people. Supposedly this process took place over these hundreds and hundreds of millions of years.
Well, each step that you're talking about didn't take hundreds of millions of years. Going from non-human primates to human primates took 6-7 million years, maybe 9 at the outside. So now the whole thing actually took billions of years, right? Because if life started 3.5 billion years ago, like Gish is saying, and which is reasonable enough estimate, and now we're here where we are with evolution, well then, to go from that to now took however long it took from between then and now, which is about 3.5 billion years. So, you gotta be a little bit more careful with your language, he says to the guy who recorded this decades ago and who absolutely will not be changing it because he's dead.
And of course, according to evolution theory, it is the successful organism that evolves. What is the successful organism? The one that reproduces in larger numbers.
I mean, that's so obviously true, it's basically a tautology, right? If you don't reproduce, then organisms with your genotype will not be present in the future. It's pretty basic. So yeah, I guess successful in the sense of still around to produce more members of the species. Which, how could it be anything else, right? How could it be that the organisms that persist are the ones that reproduce less? It's just mathematically impossible. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
So there'd be very large populations of these intermediates.
Ends, right? Because the thing is, goodness. Now, I'm gonna. I hate this. Okay. Organisms persist locally, right? They don't have to form global populations. So, if you have a global distribution of some large group, right? Like, say, primates, who in the past have existed on every continent but Antarctica. Only in one place did they ever evolve into, say, hominins, which means that the primates living in the Americas, or in Europe, or in Asia, were not part of this, right? And so, transitions that happen locally can involve small populations that then go on to spread, and then this new type of morphology can become a dominant, the dominant morphology of that group. For instance, most primates alive today are humans. Humans are the dominant form of primate worldwide. Period. But they evolved to become humans specifically in a much smaller area than just the Earth, right? So if you were to look at, say, the fossil record of Asia, first, there are no hominins, but there are other primates, right? Like there are lorises, and there are various types of catarrhine monkeys and apes. There are pongids. There are things like macaques and whatnot in the fossil record. Then suddenly hominins show up without any intermediate forms in the hominin fossil record at like Homo erectus. There are no ancestors to Homo erectus hanging out in the fossil record of like China, because they spread from where they did evolve, where there are lots of fossils. But if this transition happened to occur in a place where fossilization is rare, then you might not get that many transitional fossils. For example, we don't have really any fossil gorillas, at least not any that are well confirmed. Does that mean gorillas didn't evolve? Well, probably not, but they lived in forests, which are notoriously bad at preserving fossils. We have essentially, we have no fossils of forests. We have fossils of swamps that were heavily filled with trees, but that's the swamp part is what's helping with that. Strawberry Vein for $10 says, pronouncing things the way they're supposed to be and the way the person in question prefers? Oh, you mean being respectful and valuing the truth? Stay strong, Vishanti. Don't let these heathens win.
I shan't.
It's GIF.
No, it's not.
It's GIF. Because Jif is a kind of peanut butter.
You know, homophones exist.
No, that's terrible, and they shouldn't.
Well, you don't say it, scubba.
I will if I have to.
Okay.
I just currently don't have to. Also, Paleologos points out Gigantopithecus. Yes, that is in fact a pongin, which is the subfamily to which the orangutans belong, that was gigantic and in the fossil record of Asia. Heather Kuhn for $5 says, how can something that reproduces less be more successful? By having more offspring survive to reproduce. K versus R reproductive strategy. Yeah, there is that, right? Which is why when we're talking about fitness, we don't just mean who has more offspring, we mean who then themselves go on to reproduce and contribute to future generations. So yeah, that is an important distinction. But yeah, it's just not the case that every time there's a major transition in life that happens globally on a global scale where we would expect lots and lots and lots of fossils for all the organisms. Anyway, here we go.
You cannot claim that the intermediates would be inefficient. They would not be very highly suited, you see, to survive, so they'd be in few numbers. No, that's not true at all.
That's true. That's not the case. The intermediate forms that we have are in themselves actually well adapted. And you can actually see representatives of similar types of morphology today. For instance, if you've ever seen like a sugar glider, that's an animal with half a wing, right?
Mhm.
If pressure were to stay consistent over enough time and they don't go extinct, to continue to increase their aerodynamic capacity and their ability to glide, they may in fact evolve the ability to start adding energy to their glide faster than they lose it to gravity, which is what flight is. That's the difference between gliding and flight. When you can add energy to your fall faster than gravity is sapping it, then you are flying. Now, we already have half a wing in lots of animals. They're intermediate in that sense. Now, we don't actually know if they'll result in a new flying lineage because, we don't have access to the distant future. But they at least could, right? That's the kind of animal that evolves into a flying animal. So the reason, though, that there might be small numbers is because they might be geographically restricted. Not because they're less fit because of being intermediate, because they're not. Intermediate forms are highly fit individuals. However, they might be in a small habitat. So, for instance, if the only place that sugar gliders are under such heavy selection for flight is like one little forest in, say, northern Australia or something, then those are the only sugar gliders that are going to get flight. And if eventually that flight then lets them be able to do things like colonize nearby islands and spread all the way into like Asia and from there take over the world, well, we're still not going to find a lot of the intermediate fossils between modern type sugar gliders and flying sugar gliders because the transition happened in a small area. But in that area, they were indeed highly fit.
According to evolution, it is a successful organism that evolves, and the successful organism is the one who reproduces in larger numbers.
With the caveats like we gave, roughly, but again, it only has to be locally.
So at all times during this evolutionary process, there'd be very large population of these evolving creatures, or the intermediate forms, or the transitional types, you see. Therefore, evolution would have produced an enormous number of intermediates or transitional forms. Billions times billions.
Yeah, of individual organisms, yes. Of fossils available to find, no, considerably less. The chances of any one organism being preserved as a fossil and then being found by humans is extremely tiny.
I'm just laughing because his whole thing is billions of billions. Like, big numbers don't make it impossible.
It also kind of reminds me of some of the Trump campaign speeches. We talk about billions and billions. Like, did he get it from Gish? I don't think he's religious enough to actually be like super aware of Gish, because, as we all know, he was at best feigning religiosity to get the evangelical vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still remembering that time that he cleared a bunch of protesters away with clubs and gas so that he could hold the Bible upside down in front of a church.
And backwards, yeah.
Yeah.
When I posted about how stupid that was and how angry that made me, it legitimately made family members text me and tell me that it made my mom cry. And I'm like, if me saying, hey, don't interact with me if you think smoke, bombing, and gassing a bunch of protesters so you can take a photo up or you hold a Bible up the wrong way is making you cry, maybe you should just not follow me on social media.
Yeah, probably not. Pibblepunk for $2
Not like
says...
you have to, so... Yeah.
Pibblepunk for $2 says, Bugs, the first to evolve falling with style. Yes, that is accurate. Bugs were the first flying animals.
Billions of those things would have lived and died. If evolution is true, our museum should contain millions and millions and millions of fossils of these intermediates.
I don't know about the numbers.
Do you know how many trilobite and Cambrian critter fossils there are?
Almost certainly
there's
not.
So many right now that aren't even in museums because we have so many.
Yeah, he almost certainly does not know. But yeah, and one of the things is, yeah, we do have a lot of them in museums. That's the other thing. They're right there. You could just go look at them.
Today in our museums we have about 250,000 different fossil species.
That's a lot.
Yep.
Represented by tens of millions of cataloged fossils. 250,000. Now, if evolution is true, quite obviously, then tens of thousands of those fossils should be of intermediate types.
I hate to keep saying it, but yeah, and they are. Like, Can you hear the sound of the yodeling getting closer and closer to Dwayne Gish? Can you hear it? It's right there. It just keeps approaching. Yep. Just
creeping up on him.
All the transitional fall. And by the way, that transitional species slideshow that I use only contains the ones for which I could easily find high quality images. There are thousands of more intermediate species for which getting good quality images is just harder because most fossil species don't have popular images you can just download from the internet because most people don't care about most fossil species. That doesn't mean they don't exist, or that they're not in museum collections, or they haven't been described. They just weren't quite photogenic enough to make it onto, like, the front page of the internet, I guess.
Why, there should be no doubt about the fact of evolution.
You're right, there shouldn't be. And other than people who reject evolution for non-evidentiary reasons, there really isn't, right? There's as much doubt about evolution in the actual fields of science that bother to deal with it as there is about the shape of the Earth in, like, geography circles, right? There just isn't any doubt about this, really. Now, the exact details, sure, right? Just like in cartography class, you know, it's like, oh, exactly where should we draw the coastline on this little spit of land? Because it changes from time to time with erosion and deposition and whatnot. Yeah, okay, great. That's a great little controversy to have inside this extremely narrow field in cartography. But, like, no one in cartography or geography is like, well, you know, what if the Earth is actually donut-shaped? Or flat? Or what if it's actually the inside of a sphere instead of the outside of a sphere? No one's having these discussions.
Hashtag research Taurus Earth.
Yes. Actually, there's a mode in Civilization that makes a Taurus Earth because
oh my god.
Because, you know, on the left and right side of the map wraps around itself, which it should, right? But that actually makes the Earth a cylinder on Civilization, right? Because you can't go up to the North Pole and then come back out somewhere else on the North Pole, like elsewhere, east to west. But there's also a setting where if you go up through the north, it wraps around back to the south. And when you connect a rectangle on both sides, like on the east-west axis and the north-south, that's what a torus is. So yeah, there's a torus world mode for Civilization, which is, I always found that a little amusing that you could do torus world. Anyway.
Oh my god. Maverick Cronin says the Earth is really a Klein bottle. Amazing.
Yes. By the way, a Klein bottle is the, like, 4-dimensional equivalent of the 3-dimensional Mobius strip, which is a 2-dimensional shape with only one side. So,
have you seen the videos of people filling up Klein bottles?
Yes. Yeah,
it's so good.
It's cool stuff. Look up Klein bottles when we're done with this. Anyway, here we go.
It should be the most well-established...
Oh, wait. There was a super chat.
Oh, yes, we should.
Mimi.
Astronaut Mimi for $1.99 says we should get a yodeling button for these streams.
Seconded.
I will keep that in mind. That is probably something I could do.
Fact known in science. All we'd have to do is just look at the fossil right there in front of us. On the museum shelves, in the museum displays, we would have abundant evidence of the fact of evolution.
Yep.
On the other hand, if creation is true, we'd expect something very different, wouldn't we?
Yes. Very, very different.
If creation is true, you see, each one of the basic types of plant and animals.
What's a kind? It's the only response there. What counts as a basic type there, Mr. Gish? Now, also, Elron Teller has gifted a Dapper Dinosaur membership, and it went to Vadim Slamovsky-Radchenko. Thank you very much. All right.
What one might call basic morphological designs, or what we creationists would call the created kinds.
Okay, so here's the problem with that, though, right? You can range in what that counts as so widely that when you talk to, like, say, Stephen Meyer, he seems to think it's just the phyla. God created chordata, so, like, tunicates and humans can share a common ancestry. Okay, sure, I guess. It's kind of weird, but okay, yeah, I guess that could be a kind. Or all the way down to, like, this guy I recently found out existed, Doug Batchelor, who says that the created kind is literally the species, and who rejects speciation.
What?
I'm not kidding.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's new.
He's like, there's never been an observed event of speciation, and the species are the kinds that God created. And I'm just like, okay, so you think that Noah took onto his ark, and he also thinks that dogs were a different kind from wolves, apparently. So you think that that Noah took onto the ark a pair of dogs, a pair of wolves, a pair of like golden jackals, a pair of maned wolves?
You don't even have to go back that far. What does he think Gregor Mendel did?
Don't worry about that. He probably doesn't even know who Gregor Mendel was.
Oh my god. Okay. All right.
Yep. He probably couldn't tell you that he was a monk either.
No.
It's another thing that a lot of the people that creationists like to kind of crap all over, like Lyell, committed lifelong Christian all the way to his death.
Yeah. I just love that. They're like, atheist evolutionists! And it's like, man, if Lyell could hear that from beyond the grave, he would be so upset.
Yep.
Yeah.
Look, if there's a heaven and Christians go to it, I hope that Charles Lyell has something to talk to about with all those young Earth creationists that were dragging his name through the mud.
Oh, you know, remember when you get to heaven, you learn the truth about everything, and you can watch history like a big movie. That's what Kent Hovind says. He's like, yeah, I'm going to watch the flood happen. So Lyell totally watched the flood. They screen it every Thursday.
He basically disproved on his own.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
They would appear abruptly, fully formed, right at the start.
Which is exactly what we don't see.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Like, if your view of what the quote-unquote kinds are, you're going to have to go back farther than just phylum. Because even the phyla don't appear abruptly in the Cambrian, right? We have stem members of modern phyla in both the Cambrian and earlier in the Ediacaran. Like, we have stem mollusks and stem bryozoans. Actually, that one might not be it. We have stem mollusks, at least. We have stem arthropods in the Cambrian. We even have stem bilaterians in the Ediacaran. Stem bilateral. That means bilaterally symmetrical things that are basal to both humans and crabs.
We'll all be crabs eventually. Lady Moonweb in the chat says, nobody ever talks about how good trilobites taste historically. I wonder why. Well, now you can, because they're back, baby.
Trilobites are back. Valdivia told us.
Mm-hmm.
No one gets that. You know that, right? We're the only two.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone actually took the time to figure out all of our inside jokes and references, it would probably take them years.
See immediately, a clam would be a clam. Snail would be a snail.
You know that we actually
I'll do a favor. I'll post the photo in the chat.
You know, we actually have mollusks with two shells on either side that don't actually fold together, and instead they're still walking on their muscular foot across the surface of the bottom of the ocean. Exactly what you would expect if bivalves and organisms like limpets and snails shared a common ancestor. We actually have primitive bivalves that, rather than attaching themselves with a holdfast at the joint of their shells, actually were just wandering around. We also have organisms that are basically snails, but without the torsion. We have gastropods with flat, straightish shells. And we also have gastropods that are, we have mollusks that are basal to both snails and cephalopods that have shells that extend up from the back. And then we have some cephalopods that have a similar shell and still are using a muscular foot, but are starting to get tentacles at the front.
Ooh!
We've got all of it. So no, clams don't just appear suddenly. Neither do cephalopods. Neither do bivalves. We have transitional forms for all of these things. And you can say, well, maybe God just made them that way. Okay, sure, maybe, but you still can't say we don't have any candidates for morphological intermediates between these groups of animals. We do.
Oh, we got some Valdivia appreciators in the chat.
Paleologo says this isn't pronounced Ediacaran. So I've heard more than one pronunciation, and I know, based on previous history on this channel, I should have a strong opinion about this one. I don't. It's like whether it's Caribbean or Caribbean. I just don't care. You can say whatever you want. Ediacaran, Ediacaran, whatever. I like Ediacaran because I feel like it sounds fancier. That's it. That's literally the only reason. I think it sounds fancier. I got nothing else. In fact, if someone can supply me a source that says like, "Oh no, this is the actual correct pronunciation," it's more or less universal.
You'll ignore it.
I don't know. I might not.
You'll ignore it.
I mean, I'm enough of a descriptivist that if everyone says it one way, maybe I should correspond to that. Which is not the case for GIF versus GIF, where GIF, as far as I can tell, is actually in the majority, which makes it correct because of descriptivism.
Nah.
Yeah.
Also, in your Discord chat, there is some art by Dinah. I believe that's how they're pronouncing it. Doing suborbital platypus art. So,
nice.
all you members, get in the Discord.
Yeah, get in the Discord. It's a lot of fun. Actually, we're going to be watching 3 episodes of Power Rangers after this. Only 3. Normally we watch 4, but if we watch 4, it'll get us to like part 1 of what's essentially a 4-part arc. And so I want to do the whole 4-part arc as one day. So that's going to be on Tuesday. Anyway, here we go.
Idiot Karen.
Shouldn't it follow the Australian pronunciation for the place? I mean, maybe it should. I just don't know what that pronunciation is because I've never been there. We're just too Australian in general.
All right, Mr. EU prescriptivist.
I was supposed to go to Australia a number of times, but it just kept getting canceled. One time because of jellyfish. Not going to Australia, too many jellyfish. Wait, really? Yep.
I wouldn't be worried about the jellyfish. I'd be worried about the blue ring octopus.
Well, the concern with the jellyfish was not that they would be a danger to the personnel, but rather that they would gum up seawater intakes. And I don't know if you know, but aircraft carriers take in a lot of seawater. A lot. Of necessity.
Big boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because basically, all the fresh water on the ship, whether potable or not, comes from seawater. They're big desalinators. And if your seawater intakes get gummed up, first to go is like laundry, because that's actually just seawater. The Navy washes clothes in seawater. But then after that, it starts going like, okay, no showers. Then it's like, okay, you're on rations for how much water you can drink.
Nope, not good.
Yeah, not a fun time.
Our flesh bags need water. Lots of it, turns out.
A few times while I was in the Navy, they actually did secure showers as a result of like low potable water amounts because of various things like, oh, hey, we have to do maintenance on like the desalinator and whatnot. Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
Jellyfish would be a jellyfish. An onion would be an onion. A lily would be a lily. A tiger would be a tiger.
Okay, so the problem with jellyfish is that we basically have virtually no fossils for them because they're so soft-bodied. So it's pretty hard to say there. But when it comes to things like flowering plants, we do in fact have primitive flowering plants like Archifructus that have the basic reproductive structures of a flower, but don't even have petals yet. And they themselves are very similar to non-flowering plants that are closely related in like, the middle of the Cretaceous. When it comes to tigers, we actually have a whole lineage of like carnivoriforms that are basal to both dogs and cats, going into feliforms and like Proilurus, which is one of the earliest feliform animals that we've ever found, and it looks a whole lot like a cat, except it also looks a whole lot like Hesperocyan, one of the earliest caniforms that we have, which is ancestral to dogs. It's weird how when you go back in time, the members of these groups look more and more like each other. It's almost like they developed from common ancestors. And we go through that into like actual true cats, and then into like genus Panthera. We actually have, fossil pantherans in that genus that includes both the lions and tigers. Like, yeah, we have all of these things. Tigers don't just spring up in the fossil record, surprisingly enough. They have antecedents. Harry Bronson for $5 says, isn't it true that everything tastes like chicken because that's what dinosaur tastes like? The proof is in your kitchen, Dwayne. I actually think the everything tastes like chicken is more that chicken doesn't have a very distinct flavor, and so it tends to just take on flavors from what it's cooked with. So if you cook 2 dishes with similar spices, and one of them has like chicken and one of them is like some other protein, you'll get a lot of the same types of flavors that you get from the chicken, just on top of like beef or pork or whatever else you're cooking with. I think that's probably more it. Which I also hear is true for grasshoppers. I hear they also take on the flavor of whatever they're cooked with. So there you go. DM What You Have a Wing, aka DM Fwing, for $2 says, ugly bags of mostly water. Yes. The most accurate description of humans as taken from that crystal life form from Star Trek The Next Generation. Was that season 2? Or was that season 1?
I don't... Listen, the first 2 seasons of TNG, I kind of try to forget that they exist because they're just not that good.
They have some gems
They
here
did
and
not
there.
age well.
No, they definitely did.
Ugh. Yikes.
But they have gems occasionally here and there. Like there's a few episodes from both season 1 and 2 that I like. But yeah, overall they're not great. Turkey's better than chicken, says TV Lane. I tend to agree. Yeah, I like turkey.
It's a bit dry.
Yeah, but that's something you can overcome, right? Get better at basting. Put some butter under the skin when you put it in the oven.
Monkeys
Like
would be
using,
monkeys, and people would be
A little
people.
garlic.
Yeah. Oh, monkeys would be
Yeah.
monkeys and people would be people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I need to even mention the dozens and dozens of hominin species that we have that are making humans one of the most well-documented lineages in
That's
evolutionary
just
history.
unwelcome nuance.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Like, really though, Homo sapiens is one of the extant organisms with the best fossil record in terms of evolutionary antecedents. It is absurd how great the fossil record for hominins is. Other than just straight out denialism, you just can't say that there are not transitions between basal apes and modern humans. I mean, we've got so many species of Australopithecus. I mean, we've got Afarensis, Africanus, Diarmida, Sediba, on and on. With Homo, we've got Homo habilis, Homo ergaster, Homo erectus. You know, we've got archaic Homo sapiens. We've even got more things we got Sahelanthropus chinensis. We've got all of these animals going between basal Miocene apes and modern humans. It is a abundance. It's almost embarrassing abundance compared to basically any other lineage. Like, we don't have this many fossils for tigers. Yeah.
We'd expect to find the fossils, you see, of each basic type appearing fully formed with no evidence that these basic types have arisen from a common ancestor.
Sounds like creationism.
Okay.
Look, no,
Okay, Dwayne.
That's an actual prediction for creationism.
Yeah, I know. I just, having been to a natural history museum, I'm just like, but look at them.
Yep. So the problem is that's a prediction that's been didn't come true. So normally what we would say is that's creationism falsified, my guy. Yeah. Your prediction is basically the opposite of what's true. So yeah. Now here's one of the things, right? Creationists now like to say, oh, well, we predict, and then they'll come up with something that they actually didn't predict. Which basically, what Dwayne Gish here is predicting is really what creationists should be predicting. Like, oh no, we predict nested hierarchies for reasons. No, you don't. You only did that when it became too evident that the nested hierarchies in life are real for you to plausibly deny them. Back before that became so obvious to basically everyone with a high school education, you were denying it. That was the actual prediction of your model, is that we should see completely separate organisms with no objective nesting, and that any nested hierarchy you can come up with is ultimately going to be subjective. We've known that's wrong since Carolus Linnaeus, but it hasn't been quite so obviously wrong. And so, yeah, like every single prediction that creationism makes that isn't just a retrodiction to fit evidence they used to pretend would never be found has been shown to be false. And all the predictions that they're making that are in fact retrodictions to accommodate the evidence that has been found that they said wouldn't be found are just that. They're post hoc rationalizations to cling on to an obviously incorrect idea. Sorry, Peter in the chat, but I suspect at some deep down level, Peter, that you know that this whole thing is nonsense. Maybe I'm wrong.
Now, there'd be variation within the limits of each kind, of course.
The limits of the kinds. A thing that has never even been had a mechanism proposed. Because basically what a limit within the kind would have to be is just some limit on what mutations can occur. What limits them? What determines which mutations are so outside the kind that they're not allowed to happen?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Maybe it's just God. God sits there and all mutations are directly caused by God. He specifically causes mutations. And he specifically doesn't cause mutations that would take organisms outside of their kind. Which would work But it would also then mean, so anyone who has a mutation resulting in a debilitating genetic disease, that's something that God did to you in particular. He was like, okay, this person, I'm going to give them some horrible genetic disorder as a result of a mutation that I am actively giving them right now. I feel like maybe that's not the kind of God that most Christians believe in. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Of course, we know today we have many races of people.
Oh, God.
We have many varieties of dogs, as Darwin noted.
Okay. He's still going with these are just variations within the kind, and that's something that is a natural occurrence.
Okay.
Yeah, there really aren't races. That was less well established in like the 80s and the 90s. That really wasn't very well established until after the Human Genome Project was finished. So
I was gonna say genomics, so you just were on the same wavelength.
Yeah. So again, that's one of those like little iffy here in 2023, but back in like the 80s and the 90s, it was a little less iffy.
When he visited the Galapagos Islands, there are many varieties of finches.
Tanagers, but okay.
But you see, what the creationist points out is that those finches in the Galapagos Islands are not only still birds,
which they would have to be because
and reptiles
and chordates and animals and eukaryotes. Yep. Because once a clade is established, the descendants of members of that clade cannot escape that clade. That's how it works. It's like, how many generations do you have to go before your descendants no longer have your ancestors as their ancestors? Well, that's not how it works. If you have kids, and they have kids, and they have kids, and they have kids, on down into the future, your mom will still be there however many times great-grandmother. There's no escaping it. That's just how it works. So yes, birds will always be birds. Finches will always be finches. These happen to be tanagers, and so they will always be tanagers. But, yeah.
They're still finches. And we may have many varieties of dogs, but they are all dogs. As you note, that you can't...
Basic misunderstanding of set theory, basically, is what's going on here.
Yeah.
Right? So set theory, you can have different kinds of sets, right? Now, in biological evolution, we have sets that contain other sets that themselves can then go on to create new sets, but they will always be contained within the larger set. So if you can't remove a set from the larger sets that contain it at any point, then always going into the future, you always get sets that are in the previous sets. So once chordates evolve... Oh, go ahead.
I have an interesting little thing to chew on. Christian theology, like, specifically in the evangelical stripe, believes, pivoting off of what Maverick Ronan said in the chat, why do creationists never notice you can't outgrow your lineage? They're like, well, everyone gets, the sin nature because we're all descended from Adam. And then I realized that they don't even have limits on that because, in evangelical theology, if you believe Jesus came back from the dead, then you become suddenly not a descendant of Adam anymore, spiritually, somehow. So now I'm like, how does this jive with their...
I'm not sure that's how I would describe the theology, but okay.
Well, they think that, because Adam, the second Adam is Jesus, and he was sinless, so you take on his nature. So. Of course, I was an evangelical for, 15 years or more, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to have my own take here, which is to say that it's pretty clear that Christianity has been influenced by Platonism, especially Western Christianity, which is why you get things like transubstantiation, which is just Platonism through and through, right? We're using distinctly Platonic ideas about things like accidents and substances and whatnot.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, I think the creationists tend to conceive of kinds as this Platonic ideal of a particular group of organisms, right? So, there's this Platonic ideal of dogness, and you recognize various canines by the degree to which they participate in the ideal of dogness. And so for organisms to change from one of these ideals to another means that they would have to abandon one version, one ideal of this kind, and go into another one, which would in fact mean that they transition from one group into a completely different group. Because for creationists, they conceive of these groups of organisms in these isolated platonic ideals. And so if you wanted to say, oh, well, cats and dogs evolved from a common ancestor, then for them, the conception is there's this currently hypothetical ideal organism, right, that might be represented by something like meiosis. So maybe we'll actually just call it the meiosis platonic ideal. And then it evolves in one hand into the canine ideal, and in the other hand into the feline ideal, making it no longer in any way connected to meiosis, which is, of course, a very primitive carnivoran that is basal to both the caniform and the feliforms.
The name Essence of Dog would be a really cool band name.
Start that band.
Well, I mean, you've already got a related devotee of it, Temple of the Dog, which is fantastic, by the way. R.I.P. Chris Cornell.
So yeah, I think that combination of Platonism, especially like I said in Western Christianity, but also it definitely occurs in Eastern Christianity too. Because Platonism was popular all throughout the Roman Empire, both East and West. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And to be fair, Platonic idealism was popular because it's intuitive, right? When you think about how you categorize the world, you have these concepts that map onto words, and you recognize that things are properly referred to by those words by the degree to which they correspond to the concept that you have in your head that is associated with that word. Now, I think that the mistake that Plato makes and that Platonists make is by thinking that the associations in your head have some external reality that the universe is bound to respect, which I don't think is true.
Yeah, I feel like that's... My mind dictates reality. It's like, oh, that idea usually doesn't hold up very well.
But you can see the inherent appeal of it, right? Because it corresponds tightly to how humans think about the world. Yeah. So anyway, all right, we'll continue on.
You can't cross a dog with a cat and get a dat or something like that. You can't get that sort of mixed breed today. And as creationists, we'd not expect to find any of that evidence in the past.
Man, too bad about that meiosis then. Whoops.
Yeah.
Is in the fossil record. So you see the predictions based upon creation and evolution are vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
They are different.
Here's one of the things I want to point out now, because now you actually get creationists who are increasingly saying, oh, creationism actually makes the predictions about the fossil record that are more or less the same as the predictions about the fossil record that evolution makes. We just have different explanatory mechanisms as to how the fossil record got that way. But that's just not true, right? Because the only reason they're saying that is because the actual predictions that are made from the actual ideas of special creation, which is what Dwayne Gish is giving us here, have been soundly falsified over and over and over again. But they don't care about the data. They care about their previous conclusion that was not arrived at as a result of data, and that they feel like they have to cling to for theological reasons.
I've got to say it. They take data, but it's not over dogma.
Ah, nice. Very nice. All right.
Data.
Evolutionist says we begin with simple forms which gradually change in more and more complex forms.
That's a bit too
Hey, do we have simple forms today?
Yes. Yeah.
Huh, weird.
Yeah, so there is actually not a strong...
If we evolved from simple forms, why are there still simple forms today?
Yes. So yeah, there's not actually an overall tendency to go from from simple to complex in various lineages. However, given that we probably did start at basically minimum complexity, over time, if you were to do like, oh, what's the average complexity? Yeah, it's gone up. That's because, you start at a wall, you have to move away from the wall. There's no other ways to go.
Oh my god, Strawberry Vein just won the chat. Cross a dog and a cat and a donkey and get a dat ass.
Nice. All right, well, it's actually time to start wrapping this up. We made it through about 8.5 minutes, which for us is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That means we'll probably have like 4 more episodes of this to go before we get through this talk.
Yeah.
It's a 50.5-minute video. Basically.
And probably some of that's preaching.
Yeah, there's a fair chance.
Yeah.
So, Vishanti, do you have anything you want to announce to people?
I am still working on channel stuff. It's just taking me longer because I am not very skilled at it.
Okay. You know, you're allowed to reach out to people who are skilled at it for help, right?
Indeed, I am.
Okay.
But I also can't financially support the people helping me, which is why I haven't done it. Because I believe in financially compensating people for their work.
Okay. That's
unlike Hollywood studios, which is why the writers are on strike.
Yes, as they well should be.
Yep.
All right, so let's see what's coming up on this channel where we do pay our writers, as in me. On Tuesday 11th, we are going to be having Kent with Bent, and you guys hit the number that we needed for Bent to wear a tutu. So
Yay!
Bent will be wearing a tutu again on the 11th.
Excellent.
Let's see, on the 13th, that is the 13th of July 2023, we will be having the third part of the Jeffrey Tompkins series, in which he basically just badly misrepresents human evolution. It's his big theme there is human evolution, and he gets pretty much everything wrong, which is pretty typical for Jeffrey Tompkins. On the 15th, I am expecting to have another one of these shows. There is a slight possibility that I might not, because I will be having some family in town, and I'm planning to still show up, do the show, then go hang out with family. That's the expectation,
well, you know,
but expectations change.
Family comes first, so...
If that happens, there will be a show that premieres at noon. It will not be live, but there will be a show. So don't worry, I already have something in backup, just in case. So yeah, there will be something here at this time slot on Saturday. I think it'll be Gish with Fish too, but if it's not, don't worry, there will still be something. All right, well that takes us a week into the future. Let's see. If you are a channel member or a patron, feel free to head over to the Discord, because we are about to launch 3 episodes of Power Rangers for funsies. Just as a group. It's going to be morphin time. Or actually, no, we're shifting into Turbo, unfortunately.
Okay.
But soon, as in on Tuesday, we will get to the point where it's time to rocket. So we can, yeah, no more shifting into Turbo. And with that, guys, I hope to see all of you on Tuesday, if I don't see you shortly in the Discord. Have a wonderful...
in a tutu.
Yes. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bent Hovend, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Elleron Teller, Phil Cavara, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostig Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babby, Monkey They Them, Mrs. Spexinder, San, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting, so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters. And either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Now, if an annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wish list, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.